Hello, good afternoon, good morning, depending on the time zone you're joining. Welcome everyone once again to the DeepTech in Maritime webinar series, in which we are exploring the digital transformation of the maritime industry that is already taking place via the state-of-the-art technologies. My name is Cristina de Lorenzo Cáceres, and I am the coordinator of the Alpha Ship Academy project, an initiative by Alpha Ship Shipping Agency aimed at continuous professional development in the maritime sector. And today I'll be moderating the session. So, after being introduced in the deep tech technologies in the first part of the program, today we'll deep dive into the fundamentals of blockchain, and we'll see some examples of its applications in maritime. And to do so, we are joined again by a top leader in this field, Mr. Anjaney Borwankar. Good morning, Anjan. Thank you very much for joining us again.
Thank you, Christina, for having me.
So, for those who are new to this program, let me briefly introduce him. Anjan began his career as a seagoing officer and has worked with prestigious organizations such as McKinsey and Maersk. He's also the co-founder and CEO of Navozyme, a deep tech company focused on digitalizing the maritime industry, which has developed several acclaimed solutions. He's a pioneer in applying technologies in the maritime industry, having collaborated with institutions like the Nautical Institute in London or the Maritime Organization. Before we begin, I'd just like to briefly mention that this session is being recorded for later viewing. And I'll go over the participation tools. That on one hand, we have the chat accessible by the speech bubble icon. So you can leave your questions that will be addressed at the end. And also we have the raise your hand button. So you can request to speak and then your mic will be activated so we can hear you. And without further ado, I'll happily hand it over to Anjan now.
Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen so that it's easier to follow my presentation as well. Just let me know once you can see it. Can you see it already?
Perfect, yes.
Yeah? Okay, super. So again, thanks for that introduction. And, those who are connected, we will have some time later for Q&A as well. I plan to reserve 15-20 minutes for that. And of course, Christina will moderate this. Now, as Christina mentioned, this is the second part of a series of 3 sessions. And in the first part, basically, what we did is we kind of touched upon what is deep tech, right? And I won't go into all that again, but what excites me about deep tech is that it has a potential for really profound impact on society. And we are all part of society. So this is not just about maritime, etc. This is really about understanding a technology or a set of technologies that are transforming the world as we talk today. The talk, of course, is going to be about what is blockchain, one of the technologies that we use in our company. And the final session, the part 3, will be more about AI. Artificial intelligence, right? So this whole thing is actually done with the idea of giving the message to those who are already familiar or experienced leaders in maritime. And it should not be a new message, but that these technologies are fundamentally changing the way we operate and create and deliver value, which means it's affecting your business model. Those who are new to this industry and want to join this industry, this can be very exciting because as you prepare for future careers, it's not just about going on board ships and navigating as I have done before. It is much more than that, right? It's about creating products that will fundamentally change the way we are able to create value. And I'm going to touch upon some of those examples today. So we basically mentioned in the last session that, we're going to talk about some examples. And I showed some examples very briefly, how AI, for example, is helping to optimize bunkering operations, right? And what that does is basically saves time. What that means is that it saves wasted fuel burn. So when we talk about climate change and all these big issues, what we have to do is take that big concept and bring it down to ground reality, or better, sea reality. And here is where Navozyme comes in with its applications, right? So I'm going to try and basically demonstrate how we are able to apply these technologies. Today's session is going to focus on blockchain. So I mentioned last time that when I talk about technology, I like to, again, make it very real. So this is, of course, an old photo, but a real photo that I took in the Philippines, where seafarers, all these are people who go on board ships and they operate ships. And these seafarers are waiting basically for stamps, signatures, seals on their documents so that they can go on board, right? And this is how it still looks in many places in the world, the Sea Service Record Book, etc., right? Other documents, certifications, etc. And this is not just about the Philippines, it's also in the developed world, in Europe, in the US, etc. And it surprises us, right? But that's the ground reality. So we are using technology to basically transform that, right? And I won't go into this again right now, but last time I basically showed how these documents and the data and the information can be securely coming from the issuer directly to the mobile phones of those seafarers, right? This is already happening today. We have more than 15,000 such documents issued. And this is what excites me. So today's session is going to deep dive into the technology called blockchain, right? And it's in 3 parts. We're going to look at what is blockchain exactly. And I'll try not to be too technical, but we have to learn a few things to understand this technology and appreciate it better. And hopefully you'll enjoy that, right? I'm going to dive into some of the learnings I had of delivering the first program on blockchain many years ago. And I was also invited by the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, to run a workshop on this particular topic. So the second part is going to be about actual examples that we are implementing as we talk using this technology, right? And I'm going to focus, it depends on the time, but we're going to basically at least cover a couple of examples. And then last but not the least, I always like to bring it back to you, the listener, which is, and all this, what does it mean for you? And what can you do with blockchain particularly? How would you even begin, right? So hopefully that this will be exciting. You'll have to bear with me for the next 20 minutes or so, and then we can open it up to any discussion that you would like. Okay, so I'm diving into blockchain now, and we go right at the start, okay? And we go with this newspaper article from the Times London, which basically says, the headlines there is, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks. So this is about, what has this got to do with blockchain, you may be wondering, okay? The date on the newspaper in this photo is maybe very small for you to see, but there's a message. This newspaper is from the 3rd of January, 2009. And it so happens that this date is also the date in which the Bitcoin was born, right? So what is that a coincidence? No, it's actually not a coincidence, okay? It's basically a message to the world that here is a new technology which is decentralized, which is distributed, where you don't need to depend on a central actor like the chancellor, somebody appointed by the government to save those who are already rich. At least this was the ideology. This was the thinking behind the launch of Bitcoin. And when I say Bitcoin in this context, I'm not talking about the money, okay? I'm not talking about the digital crypto. I'm actually talking about the technology. Unfortunately, the technology, which in purest terms will be called the blockchain protocol. Forget about that if you're not following this part. But the crypto and the name is the same. But here we are talking of this technology which was launched on this particular day. Again, normally I teach this course for at least 6 hours with a lot of exercises. I'm going to try and compact all that learning into 20 minutes. So bear with me. This is being recorded, so you can go back and see, things if they're not clear. But if there's one message that you want to take away from what is blockchain and why I feel really strong and excited about this, is because for the first time, technology is allowing us to digitalize trust, right? So basically, there was a trust deficiency with central actors. There still is one today, right? And here is a technology that helps us basically package trust in a digital way. Now, I'll pause for a second and think about the power of this. When I say trust digitized, trust is required for every transaction that we do. And I'm not just talking of business transactions. I'm talking of social transactions as well, right? We go to a particular coffee shop to buy coffee because we trust the coffee there is beautiful, it's delicious, right? We do business contracts, and you can have the legal agreements and all that, but if you didn't trust who you're buying from, you wouldn't actually do that transaction, right? So imagine how much saving we can get in our time, money, and effort if you're able to do this in a more efficient manner, right? Without relying on legal contracts and people alone. And this is what blockchain is about. I hope I got you excited. Let's go deeper, right? So what exactly is blockchain? Now, you've probably seen this before, right? That it's a distributed ledger technology, right? And ledger is what? Ledger is nothing but an accounting book, right? In the past, this is how it was. I'm old enough to have seen these books, right? Where accountants would actually write every transaction. But now imagine there's a magical book which can make exact copies of this anywhere that you want, and they're available in real time, and you can trust it fully, that whatever you're seeing there is exactly the record that is there in that central big book, right? So this is basically what's happening here. So it's nothing but a database, it's a ledger, but it has a lot of special features, right? And what is those special features? We'll unpack some of that, but obviously I can't go into each and every detail. But again, the key word here is trust. So whenever you think of blockchain, think of its superpowers, okay? What you should be thinking about are 3 things at least. One, that it's of a distributed nature. So there's no central command and control, okay? I'll expand this in the next slide. Second, it's immutable. What does that mean? That means whatever is recorded is there for life. Doesn't mean you can't have another record, but you can't delete that, right? So you can modify that and there'll be a trace of that modification, but you cannot delete it. This is really fundamentally different from most other databases that we know. And then finally, there is the possibility of it being transparent, right? So you can actually make it available to anyone with easy access. So these are the 3 superpowers that I want you to think about as we continue this talk. Let's look at the distributed networks a little bit more carefully. This is again a classic diagram, but just for you to understand this and why this is important, I want you to see the picture on the left, which says centralized. And imagine this red dot at the center. If that red dot disappears or something goes wrong with that, all the other thing around it collapses. I think this is easy to see. This is central command and control. You have the army general. You kill the army general or capture the army general, you basically have, won the war, right? In chess, you kill the king or you checkmate the king, you win the game, right? So this is central command and control. Most man-made systems are central command and control, or a version of that, and in purest terms, decentralized. So decentralized is again like the centralized thing, except that it's a few more distributed. So you have the headquarters in a particular location, and then you have their subsidiaries in a particular location. But again, if the head of that subsidiary, decides something, it affects everyone around it, right? Easy to understand. But now look at the last one. And this is really what blockchains are about. And in true terms, it should be referred to as distributed, not decentralized. Okay, I'm being a bit academic here, but I think I will use that vocabulary going forward. Now choose any dot you like on this distributed diagram and let it go. And what will you see? Nothing goes wrong. The network still remains, right? So this is the resilience. This is the power that you get via a distributed network. So imagine your information stored in the first way, where you're protecting it by a lot of firewalls, thicker walls, which is the old paradigm of security. And the new paradigm is distributed networks. Like the COVID virus, there is no leader, right? Because there is no leader, you can't kill it so easily. It remains and it emerges and re-emerges all the time, right? So this is the superpower that is there. By the way, most natural systems are distributed. Okay, we don't have time to explore all that. It's really fun to look at that, but maybe in your Q&A or in your comments, think of any natural distributed system that you can think of. Okay, so one of the superpowers, the distributed networks, which gives it its resiliency. Okay, let's go one or two more like technical concepts to appreciate, and then I'll bring it back to maritime and its applications. Okay, so bear with me a little longer. So very important to understand one fundamental piece of the building block of blockchain. Okay, and it was there for many decades, even before blockchain came into being. So the hashing mechanism. And what is hash? It's nothing but it's like a machine that takes data. Okay, you put it into this machine, into this function, if you want to call it, and it churns out basically a random set of numbers, characters, etc. Okay, so let's watch this for a second. I'm going to just play this hashing. It's a real hashing algorithm, and I'm just going to show you. Watch the input. So I'm going to type in some data. Let's say I'm typing in some text, right? As you see here, and I've been using this demo for quite some time, right? Including in many places. So basically, what you're seeing below is the result of this data, the hash, as it's called. Okay, and observe a few things. That with every character, every space, what is there at the bottom changes completely at random. It's impossible to predict it, but it's always the same size. Yeah, are you noticing that? So it's the same size. It's completely random. You cannot predict it really, right? And irrespective of how much is the input, so you could actually fill out a whole library on top. You are still getting a small set of characters at the end, right? Okay, so this is what a hash is. And to understand this conceptually, think of it like a digital fingerprint. And by definition, it's unique, right? Just like all of us in the world have fingerprints that are unique that we can identify with. Same thing. The hash is nothing but a fingerprint of this data, right? This is very important. You'll see why that becomes very important. So what you can see, it's also one other very important point in hashing. It's like a one-way valve. So by looking at this output at the bottom in red below, this set of characters, can you guess what the input was? It's almost impossible, right? But if I gave you exactly that thing at the start, right, you will be able to, again, regenerate exactly this hash. So what is this powerful thing? If I have two fingerprints, I can match them. That's how crime is detected, right? In the real world, you can look at the fingerprint. You don't know who the person is, but you see another fingerprint which is exactly the same, and it's unique. We know that. Then you can say for sure the origin is the same. Same thing is what is done inside the applications that we do. This is why hashing is very important. Okay, one of those things that we really need to know about. It's used in many things. So now let's go back and understand what a blockchain is in a little bit more detail. Okay, and this will be my last so-called technical piece. Okay, it's not technical. I hope you're still with me. So data, right, is basically being, actually the right word is not encrypted. It's basically being hashed. Okay, so, and what is data? Let's just pause for a second. Data can be anything. It can be a photo, can be a movie file, it can be your name, it can be some letters, anything that we have, no, is data at the end of the day. So your certificate for seafarers, it's not the piece of paper, it's what is on it, which is very, very, very important. The name, who's the institution, who's signing it off, all those are pieces of data. So let's look at that. Okay, so we take the data. So I take the representation of a certificate here. That data is converted. We know how to hash it. We just use a hashing algorithm. There are many types of hashing algorithms depending on your needs, but we do the hash. This is the symbol for hash, and you get this output, right? So this is the first step. You take the data and convert it into a digital fingerprint. Simple, I think very easy to see. Now, what do you do with this data? You actually put it inside a container called a block. What is a container? It's the rules of a set of files. So we have PPT, we have CSV, we have XLS. All these are containers, nothing more. JSON, right? So imagine there is a file type which is used in blockchain. We won't get very technical, but there's a container. And this container takes and contains this hash. That's it, right? So that's how the first block is. Okay, and so what happens with this? Okay, so let's call this block N. And now you have some new piece of data, or you made a modification to that certificate, let's say. Okay, so what will happen? You take that certificate or the new data, and I'm representing new data by the red color. So something changed on that certificate. What can you do again? So you hash that. Okay, so new data, basically using the hash. And we take that first block. Remember the block and so the container and its contents is also data. Again, let me pause for a second. So one is the raw data, which we converted into the digital fingerprint. We put it inside a container, but the container and the block itself is also data. So we take that and we also hash it. And we put it inside a new block, okay? And that's your new block, block N plus 1. So what is happening here is that each block is linked to the previous block, right? This is how we can do the tracking and tracing. And it becomes a chain. So you have block 0, the Genesis block, it's called the first block, connected to the second block. How is it connected? Block 1 has the Genesis block inside it, and so on and so forth. This is how it's forming a chain of blocks, which is why it's called blockchain. Okay, so this particular structure is what is known as blockchain, right? And what happens? The more blocks you have, the more security you get, right? So visualize it like this. I think this is easier for people to see, right? It's like the Russian dolls. If you want to get to the small doll, you have to go through all the others, etc. Find your own analogy. There are many, many analogies. So when we do the course, we have a lot of fun with this, trying to figure out, how would you actually explain this to a child? Okay, so this is another exercise you may want to try now that you're getting used to this concept, but how do you explain it to someone else? Okay. Okay, now we've seen what is blockchain, etc. Right? I just want to leave you with this, that 2009, we had Bitcoin, and that's great. But, the flavor of ice cream has evolved from vanilla ice cream. So vanilla ice cream was there, and everyone got vanilla before, but that's not how it is today, right? You have literally hundreds of what are called blockchain protocols. There are hundreds of flavors available today, and they come in many things. Again, I won't get into it. You have open, close, public, private, hybrid, permission, all things. So the key here is, before you pick up this tool, don't forget, technology is just a tool. Before you pick up the tool, try to figure out what are you trying to solve? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Then pick up this tool, right? So the flavor you choose depends on the use case. This is very important. It's not like everything has to be with Bitcoin or everything has to be with Ethereum or any of the others. No. Right? So in the course that I teach, Fundamentals of Blockchain, we go into a lot of depth into this. But again, this is just giving you a sample of, okay, it's a very rich topic. If you have to remember one thing, remember that it's about digitalizing trust, okay? And that's what makes it powerful. Okay, now I'm going to give you an extra, bonus kind of thing, right? And again, don't worry if you're not following each and every piece of this, but there is a framework that we developed, pretty original from our point of view because applicable in maritime. And there are basically 4 areas of value creation using blockchain technology. So it's like if you're going to use the screwdriver, you have to first identify what a screw looks like, before you go to the tool. So how would you know whether blockchain would make sense for the problem that you're trying to solve, right? And they come in 4 classic areas. One is called provenance. In simple terms, that means tracking and tracing the origin of that data, right? You want to know whether the certificate is actually come from the right institution or is it a fake one. You want to know whether your Louis Vuitton bag is actually a Louis Vuitton bag or is it a fake thing, right? All that is provenance. Notarization. That means you need some party, right? Wherever there is a third party involved to prove that it's correct. We saw the central bank actor, right? You have an opportunity to make that process more efficient using blockchain technology, right? There's this whole concept of value transfer. We're not getting into cryptos and tokenization and all that, but it's a very powerful tool. You can have micro transactions at almost zero cost, right? So imagine if you wanted to sell property to 10 million people today in the traditional way. Imagine all of them going to the notary, all of them opening a bank account. It would not be worth it, right? But you can do this very easily using digital assets. So blockchain technology does that pretty elegantly. And then finally, last but not the least, is what I call streamlining, okay? Which are whenever you see a central actor who is just information transferring, right? That value creation can be disrupted very easily using this technology, right? You don't need a middleman. So again, I won't get into each and every aspect in more detail, but if you are creating value today in a traditional way, in any of these areas, I think it's really important for you to explore how this technology will affect you, okay? So now let's go into the practicalities. In about 10 minutes, I hope to show you that. Before that, just one quick starter checklist, okay? So if there are multiple parties involved in data interchange, in the maritime industry, always, right? So you have a port clearance process. The ship is coming in, right? The captain has to send this information to the agent. The agent has to report this information to the maritime authority, to the port authority, to the MARPOL operator, maybe to the shipper, et cetera, et cetera. Multiple parties involved, right, in information exchange. And why is that important? Because multiple parties means there are a lot of untrusted parties who have to make sure the information is accurate, right? Here is where, again, the technology can help. This is about trust. Is it of a critical nature, the information? So if you get it wrong, will it affect the business and be harmful in a big way? Yes. Not all information is harmful in that sense. No, you're buying a cinema ticket and you get something wrong. Okay, it's not a disaster, right? But you have a wrong information about the MARPOL data and the ship can get arrested, right? And it has big implications, right? So these are the questions. The last point is also very important because what technology does very well is simple processes, but which are being repeated often and often and often. The port clearance process for that particular ship is almost the same every time, right? So can it be automated? Can it be? This is where, you can use things like smart contracts, etc. I won't get into too much detail, but you can set up a set of rules which can be implemented whenever, the correct trigger is there. This is where, again, the technology can help aid us. Remember, it's not the solution. It's an enabler for what we want to solve. So if you enjoy data entry and checking documents and you made a life of that, that's great. I mean, nothing, I would wish you well. But there is something which makes things much easier, right? Automated, right? So we want to embrace these kinds of things because they're coming either way. Let's look at some maritime examples. And I think what I want to first say is that this is not a technology that is coming, okay? It's been there now for already, I told you, 15 years at least. And we as Navozyme, the company, are researching more than 30 odd companies, okay? I'm showing you a sample of some of them. Some of these companies have also disappeared. Some others have emerged. Okay, so for example, IBM TradeLens thing, which we were tracking for quite some time, even before it was called TradeLens, today doesn't exist anymore, right? But you can see the areas of disruption, whether it's maritime insurance, logistics, supply chain, the phytosanitary certificates, et cetera, okay? So I'm going to speak from direct first-hand experience. So I prefer to talk about my company, Navozyme, and what are we doing in that space, okay? So what is Navozyme? It's a company that's a scale-up, it's mission-driven, and our mission is really to help digitalize, decarbonize via deep tech, right? And we look at real problems. I have directly been affected by these problems. Those photos I showed of people waiting to get their certificate stamped, I have been one of those people myself, right? So this is deeply personal as well. So fortunately, we've made quite a lot of headway. We've got pretty good recognition. It's taken many years of hard work to come here. And some of the innovations that we are bringing, and I'm going to show you, are first in the maritime world, okay? So again, we work across the globe. I won't get into each and every story there, but it's good for people to know, no? That this is not just something happening in a pocket. It's actually happening globally. So I'm going to show you two examples, and I chose this example of a solution which is actually for reporting of MARPOL waste, marine pollution waste. So marine pollution regulations are basically to protect the seas from getting polluted, right? And every ship has to declare what type of waste is it carrying and wants to dispose of. So every port basically has the facility to receive that waste, etc. Pretty standard process, happens all the time, all over the world. But what has been happening so far is what you see on the left side. So you basically see everything handwritten, copies of that, lots of stamps and seals, right? And so the protection of the oceans becomes a bureaucratic headache. So either you don't do it properly, or you just go through the run. So what have we done? We have seen this complex process, and we have transformed it using deep tech into something simple. So here you see this lady basically with an iPhone or with a phone, whichever you like, or even an iPad or some other device. And they're actually just saying, okay, what is the quantity that they have picked up? And it generates that document, and basically using blockchain technology, make sure that everything is authentic and goes wherever it needs to go, okay? So here is a sample of what actually happens today using this technology. This is being already run. I'm going to show you, and I'll invite this audience also, if they want to see it in action, to come to Bilbao. But basically, this certificate, which gets generated with a few clicks today, has this blockchain technology behind the scenes helping it. So all the data on the certificate is actually captured via this digital fingerprint, which goes to a distributed network, right? And anyone can verify that, anyone can see that. This becomes important because the Port State Control Inspector, the people responsible for regulating MARPOL now have a higher standard, right? But it also helps the MARPOL operators from a productivity standpoint. Many of the processes, printing of paper, going and waiting for the signature, all those things disappear, right? So I'll pause a few seconds, because if anyone wants to actually scan the QR code, it's a real thing. We call it BEES, blockchain-enabled electronic certificates or credentials. And they are real assets, living assets. It's in real time that you can actually check, so you can use your phones to just, I'm going to do it on my side. And you will see in action that it's going to the distributed network, and it's basically checking each and every data field before it's saying whether it's valid or not valid. Right now, this certificate is valid, okay? So you could also revoke the certificate. So if something changes, etc., it will basically show you in real time, this is not okay. So you can see the distributed network. This is not Navozyme who's saying that it's valid or not valid. We are not the actor. There's no monkey behind the scenes who's kind of pressing some buttons, nothing like that. This is actually the power of the technology itself, the distributed network, which is checking in all these different ledgers whether this data is still the same. If it is, it's telling you, yeah, it's all good. Please go ahead, right? So you see a real life example. Now, this is in the press, not as blockchain. So blockchain is becoming an invisible force, but you can see that it's being adopted. It's already being used in the port of Bilbao, and we are extrapolating this. We are expanding to many other ports, in Spain and beyond. And on the 27th of November, we actually have an event to showcase this from the Port Authority of Bilbao and the Ports 4.0, the innovation from the Puertos del Estado. They want to showcase this, to the world as a successful example of using DeepTech. Right, let me show you one other example. And this is for port clearance, basically for port call administration. So what is port call administration? Every time a ship comes in and leaves the port, the ship agent is responsible for taking care of that, right? Ship. They're assigned by the ship owners, but they need information to be able to get these clearances and that everything is in order. So there are lots of documents that are submitted by the ship's captain, a lot of information, declarations, etc. And this is a process, depending on where you are on the planet, which port you're in, can be a pretty cumbersome process, right? So what we have done is we've actually simplified it. We've taken the thing from the source, the captain, or even better, if the ship certificate is already available from the office, no need to again attach it, right? So I'm going to show you a short video of what it does, right? But just to give you a bit of an example here. Can you hear it? Oh, you can't hear it. Okay.
Sorry.
So let me talk you through then. So here you see the agent and master are connected via this digital platform, right? So from one source of truth, which is the captain's information, you can see that the certificates are being checked. The QR code that we saw before is also being applied here, so that all the data is proactively in real time verified. Okay, so here I was listening to the music and everything. Sorry that it didn't probably go through for everyone. But again, this is a system that's first in the world, okay? It's also connected to the National Single Maritime Window here in Spain. And how we are using blockchain technology is so that the tracking and tracing of the information. So not that you can't change it, but whoever makes that change, you're basically able to see, the provenance of that. The other thing here is, if nothing has changed, there's nothing more to be done. It will just, whoever needs to get access to that data, that certificate, that information, already gets that in real time, right? So we're using blockchain in many, many ways. It's not only about blockchain. Again, let's be careful here. It's not like everything is about blockchain, etc. No, but you see the problem and then you basically address it, right? So let me go further. I mentioned right at the start that what excites me about DeepTech is its potential for positive impact in this world. And what we track in Navozyme is what is this impact that we are actually having. So you can see that we are able to directly address many of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And we are able to also look at some of the metrics, whether it's safety, decarbonization, productivity. So these are first in the world. So we piloted this for quite some time. And some of these are estimated numbers based on 1,000 port calls during the piloting that we did with two ports, basically the port of Santa Cruz de Tenerife and Barcelona, right? But many of these things are now being implemented. And we are actually seeing that the impact of that is actually larger than originally estimated. So hopefully in a few months, we'll be able to come out with a report of the actual impact. But this is very, very exciting. So you can see something like blockchain, which has hashing, distributed networks, etc., how useful it is for society and for us in maritime, right? So let me close with, again, some questions, right? And again, remember that you can post questions, you can ask questions just after this. We got about 15, 20 minutes as promised. So I'm going to ask the following questions. Now that you know about a bit more about deep tech and particularly blockchain, so what kind of implications do you see for your work and your business, right? So one question here is, what business are you in the first place, right? So if you're in the business of intermediating data, taking data from somebody and sending it to somebody else, is this really a competitive advantage that you can sustain? Or would you need to find new ways of adding value, right? So digital transformation, we saw this in the first session. The competitors are not your traditional actors necessarily. So you may not even see what's happening if you're not following this trend. It becomes like a tsunami that suddenly comes, and then when you see it, it's too late, right? So you want to really be proactive about this. Second, rather than looking at it as a threat, if you look at this as an opportunity, what can you actually do proactively to give you that advantage? So remember, I gave you that template with the 4 different areas of value creation. I gave you a very simple checklist to look at. That's your starting point. Look at the work you're doing and try and see, do you notice any manual signatures, stamps, seals? Do you see yourself being a broker? Do you find yourself always with the problem of tracking and tracing? Do you find that, for small transactions, you're paying a very high bureaucratic fee? All those kinds of areas are perhaps your starting points to apply this technology, right? But just because you know it, do you think your organization is prepared for this change, right? So this is a much deeper topic, right? On culture, on mindsets and things like that. But this is the starting point, because if we don't change our mindsets, our attitudes, I don't think anything else will happen. So the series of talks that we're doing, and why I'm excited for doing these webinars, is to raise awareness about these topics, right? And those who are connected, I thank you again for being interested here. But with this, I'm going to stop and basically open it up to Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well. And Christina, it's over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Anjan, for this explanation and for bringing us this new mindset of opportunities with the blockchain. I'll like to welcome everyone to post their questions on the public chat that we will address. And meanwhile, I've been taking my notes myself, and I have my own questions. So I'll break the ice and start by posting mine. So I'm just wondering, because let's pretend that I run a business company in the maritime field. How do you see how easy it will be for a company to get access to this technology?
Yeah, so actually many times we may be already using this technology without knowing that, okay? So like I said, this technology is already existing for at least 15 years. And some of the pioneering companies outside of maritime also, like the financial institutions, like some other, courier companies, etc., they're already using this technology, okay? So the best, prize for a technology, the best accolade for a technology is when it becomes invisible. So, for example, I lived in Singapore for many years, and there our identity card basically has a QR code. It doesn't have an expiry date. They are using blockchain technology behind the scenes to make sure that whoever has that ID, I don't need to go physically anywhere. It's in my digital wallet on my phone, right? So access to that technology is already there. The thing is, can we see it? That would be my response.
Thank you so much. And in a more practical way, how would you recommend business people that are interested in implementing solutions for their businesses using blockchain? What would you recommend them to go to ask for development?
Yeah, good question. So before going to a tool, right, you need to understand what the tool can do and not do. So back in, I've been following blockchain technology now for at least 10 years. And in the starting, I saw lots of things happening with blockchain. I would say very crazy things. Dating apps. You can find your life partner using blockchain. And I'm like, okay, I don't get it, but maybe there is a way, there's some magic here. It's not like that, right? So before you say, and that I want to use blockchain, you want to first do a few pieces of homework. One is get to know a little bit more. So join a course, read some books, go to some people who are maybe using this technology, right? And go with a learner's initial mind, like a child's mind, right? With the idea of what is this exact? Don't fear asking the most basic questions, right? Because often people hide behind the jargon. So don't do that. Like just go and ask like, okay, what exactly is this and why is it important, etc. So the first step is just educating yourself, right? Second step is then maybe taking that checklist that I gave, right? And then seeing, okay, my business today, what is it exactly? What business am I in? And it's not such a simple answer that we think. Not enough to say ship agency for Alpha Ship, right? Because what exactly does a ship agent do? Let's go further. How, and when you come to that final piece, then you try and understand that value that you're creating. How can it be disrupted using this technology, if at all? Maybe it's not going to be disrupted. If your value is through the relationships that you have with your clients, it's about solving some problems that nobody can foresee in advance, etc. Probably your value will remain there forever, right? But if your value is really taking a document and then sending it to someone else in a very efficient manner and charging the highest fee that you can, I'm not saying you're doing that or any of the people are doing that, but if that's what it is, it's not going to last very long, right? So the starting point will be looking at your business, what are you in, and then basically seeing how this tool, now that you know a little bit about this tool, can apply to that, right? Then comes the other piece, and here I would recommend basically going to some companies or organizations. So you start partnering now. You don't have to be the manufacturer of the screwdriver to use the screwdriver, right? We don't have to manufacture the iPhone to basically use it. So good news today, this is not true 10 years ago, but good news today is there are some very good companies who can help, right? Who can help from the business side of things, who can help from the maritime side of things and the technology side of things. So get their help to take a look at your business, right? With this idea of, basically future value creation. And start preparing your organization. Because now what can happen, another thing I've seen is leaders are now all very charged up. They're very excited. They get it. But the organization doesn't get it. And that won't help. So you now need to get your leadership team to work along with you, right? So it's a journey. It's not something that will happen from one day to the other, but it is very much happening. And the leaders are actually taking advantage of this technology, right? But again, I think it's a very exciting journey, because if you get this right, if you do it in the right way with some patience and some experiments, you will have at least two advantages. One, you will be future-proofing your organization. And secondly, you'll get a massive competitive advantage, not a small one, a massive advantage compared to those who are not doing that, right? So it's worth actually investing in this.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I still, Garrett, we have some minutes ahead. I'll encourage everyone which is participating to post their questions in the chat or raise their hands. But I have another question for you. I'm just wondering because you mentioned, for instance, the dating apps that they are based on blockchain as well. In your experience, how would you say this social awareness of the blockchain implications here in our daily life? Do you consider that people that societies know that blockchain is there and it's included in many things in our daily lives, or it's not like that?
Yeah, so it's changed a lot uh, in a good way, I would say. Okay. So back in 2017, when I was talking in conferences about blockchain, the whole conversation was basically about Bitcoin. So people just thought blockchain is equal to Bitcoin, which is an application of blockchain technology for money transfer. Okay, just one small application. That's not the power of block. Plus, the way Bitcoin works has some problems. Remember, it's a technology from 2009. So the carbon footprint, the way mining is done, again, some of these words may be familiar to the listeners. It uses a lot of energy, right? So it while it has some advantage, it has some massive disadvantage. But today, that's not true. So the solutions that we use for blockchain technology, the protocols that we use, basically all those disadvantages have disappeared, right? So that kind of understanding is not yet there. However, people have moved on from just Bitcoin. The good news is there are lots of real good use cases already today in the business world. But again, like I said, the average person doesn't really need to know all the details of the technology, right? Because you don't have to build the iPhone to use it, right? It's same. You don't have to know how the satellite system works to know and use the positioning system, GPS, right? So this is not about becoming a technical expert on the different protocols, but as a business leader, if you don't know how to use the internet today to your advantage, I'd say it's the same thing. If you don't know how to put blockchain within your business strategy, you're missing out, right? And that, I think there's still a bit of sophistication required. Okay, but it has definitely progressed a lot. So today, I think when you use the word blockchain, people in a way get it, so yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned disadvantages, and I just wondering again. You mentioned that the disadvantages that the technology had at the beginning they have been solved and addressed. But how do you see the evolution of this technology? How do you see is there any path that blockchain is taking to develop and to solve maybe some characteristics that are weaknesses at the moment that the technology field is working on to develop this technology a little bit further? How do you see blockchain in the future?
Yeah, so actually, if you studying computer sciences today, you could be doing PhDs on the heart of how blockchain works, which is called the consensus mechanism. Okay, so we mentioned that magically this distributed ledger. Remember the photo I showed of the book in the center and copies of that all around. So technically, what it's called is they have solved what is called the double spend problem. Okay, that means in the digital world, you can actually make copies of the original very easily, right? In the physical world, when you give 100 euros cash to somebody else, you don't have that 100 euros anymore. It's gone. But in the digital world, it's very easy to make copies of that, right? And that was the problem, that which is the original, nobody could figure out. So what blockchain technology solved is to show what is that original, okay? So that's called double spend. And how it's done is using the consensus mechanism. So Bitcoin used a consensus mechanism, which basically used a lot of energy. You had to mine, you had to solve a problem, a mathematical problem. And that problem, to solve it, basically you had to use a lot of energy. Whoever solved it first got the reward, right? Now that's great at that time, but today we have many other mechanisms by which you can solve the consensus problem, the double spend. So this is already evolved, right? Where it's moving further is basically how the information, even the fingerprint, is being stored, for example. So you can have it stored on one blockchain network. But again, there was a problem in the past, because if you were not part of that network for whatever reason, or you didn't want to be part of that network, then you couldn't use it, right? So if you created your own, let's say, another distributed network, how would this network talk to this other network? So all those problems, it's called interoperability. So those problems have also been addressed, technologically speaking. So now we have built bridges where this network can talk to this network without it needing a central actor, right? All these kinds of innovations are going on as we talk in blockchain technology.
Well, thank you again for being so prepared for every question and ask. We have just a brief last minute, and before we close, do you encourage people to? I am assuming that you do, but do you encourage young people to study this technology and to pursue a career in this field? Do you think it's one of the careers for the future?
So again, I would encourage people to learn about digital transformation and deep tech, whether it's blockchain or it's AI or it's some other of the technologies. That's really depends on the individuals. So I'm not here trying to push everyone to become a blockchain geek or anything like that. I personally believe in this particular technology, blockchain, because of its potential to digitalize trust, right? So then it's one of those all-pervading technologies, in my view, just like the internet. But there is the other one. There's the other big giant in the room that we're going to talk about in the next webinar, artificial intelligence, right? So maybe in this webinar, I'll say everyone do blockchain. The next webinar, I say everyone do AI. That's not what. So I like to go to the source. So think of it more as the transformation that's happening in our world, in our society. What's driving that? Which is not just technology. It's also human mindsets, resistance to change, right? So anyone who does any interesting work or studies those fields obviously is guaranteed a pretty good future going ahead, because all the organizations are going to go through this, right? Change. So if you can help smoothen that change and bring benefits, you will be in demand, right? So whether you're a blockchain programmer or not is not the point. But if you fail to understand what's happening in society, in business, in life in general today, right? So the babies today are basically born with AI as their friends. What does that mean in 20 years when these people become part of the workforce? That's the kind of thing I think we need to learn today. And then you are guaranteed forever having value.
Okay. Thank you very much again. Well, I think we are running out of time, although the conversation was getting very, very interesting. I just have to say that I am so looking forward for the last part, for part 3, regarding artificial intelligence, as you were mentioning, because I think as well that this is something we are more familiar with, or at least we have a closer relationship with in our daily basis, or there are more technologies or tools, let's say, that are closer to society. So that will be very interesting too. And again, thank you so much for your time, and we will see you in part 3.
Thank you again, Christina. Thank you also, Alpha Ship Academy, for having me. See you in the last session. Bye for now. Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for joining, all the participants, and I hope that this webinar was interesting to you. As well, we are available for any questions you have at academy@alphaship.com. And so looking forward to see you, everyone, voting on the part 3 of this webinar program. Bye for now. Have a nice day ahead.